Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today we're going to be diving into a fascinating discussion with a true innovator in the tech industry. I mean, have you ever wondered how the evolution of database technology is shaping the future of cloud computing and AI? Well, joining me today is the CEO and founder of a company called Neon, which is a startup that's redefining the landscape of Postgres databases, all with its groundbreaking serverless capabilities. His name is Nikita, and with a rich history in tech entrepreneurship and a vision for a more efficient digital future, he's going to be joining us today to shed light on this revolutionary technology. But enough spoilers from me. Buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the US, where Nikita is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
So my name is Nikita. I am the CEO of Neon, and I'm building the next generation database as a service platform that is called Neon. It is aspiration and mission is to become the default Postgres provider in the world in the cloud. We only care about the cloud. I think Postgres is doing a tremendous job by becoming the number one database in the world. And we want to be the number one database as a service company that provides Postgres across all clouds and that creates the best user experience and developer experience of consuming Postgres across many, many clouds. Today, we are on AWS. More clouds will launch later, some of them later this year. And when you think about cloud, you start having things that are possible only because you're in the cloud. And the best analogy is, think about Git, the source control system. But what the best cloud experience is GitHub, which is a lot more than Git. And GitHub is not Git as a service. GitHub is GitHub. It's an entity that is a destination for a lot of open source projects. That is the destination for people to store proprietary repos and build their developer workflow around it. I think for databases, that whole developer workflow thing was kind of unattended. And every time we work with stateless code, you have fantastic tools. And when you work with databases, it feels like you're kind of in the 90s. You do get databases as a service, but just like Git as a service, it's like really far away from what's really possible and from what's really useful for the end developer. And that's our mission, to become the default Postgres in the cloud. And the how is by providing the best developer experience in the world.
Incredibly cool. I'm looking forward to finding out more about that mission. But before we do, I'd love to take you back in time for a moment. What's your origin story? What lit that spark in you? Your passion for tech and databases and everything in between, and that path you've taken from Facebook to Neon?
I have been working on databases for a long time. So I started my career in the industry at Microsoft, working on the SQL Server project. That was a long time ago in 2005. And that's when I developed my passion towards systems in general. And databases are, in a way, you squint at it, is in a way similar to building either a storage system or an operating system. That would all kind of, quote unquote, systems work. Now, it's unique for the space because there's storage, there's compute, there's query optimization, there's all this components in the database, and they have to be well thought out and well designed. And within all that, there's this architecture, call it architectural significance into how you're doing things. And so there aren't that many proper database architectures. And if you start building a data systems out of the improper architecture, it's, you're not going to succeed. And so it's rare that the architectural approach changes and presents opportunities to build something new. And what presented this time is cloud, object stores, and developer experience with what we call a time machine capabilities at the storage layer. And I think the combination of those three will allow us to build a fantastic developer experience and a fantastic company. Yeah, and back on the origin story. So I started working as SQL Server. I joined Facebook, not for a long time, because we got accepted into Y Combinator. I started my first company called MemSQL. That became single store, now north of $100 million run rate business. And what at single store, as I was running the company, I thought about the idea of Neon, but I couldn't execute on it. And I couldn't execute on it because, well, I'm running another database company and you cannot have two engines. So this one is based on the Postgres engine and the other one was built proprietary from ground up, which, by the way, is a huge technological feat. Now, when I joined Khosla Ventures, my thesis was I want to understand the breadth of the technology industry and be exposed to not just the database, because you're looking at the world through your company. At the time when I joined Khosla Ventures, we got a single store to 40 million in run rate. So you're looking at the world through the lens, right? Because you're talking to customers, you're talking to the industry, you're invited obviously to all those places. But I wanted to see a lot more breadth. But walking in, I couldn't stop thinking about Neon. And I told partners at Khosla Ventures that I want to, in addition to working in venture, incubate this company. And then it just took off, and it took off so fast that it took over my life.
What a great story. And reflecting on that journey from the Facebook bootcamp to becoming a key figure in Silicon Valley, I'm curious, especially on behalf of anyone listening that are looking to learn from your experiences, were there any pivotal moments or decisions that maybe shaped your entrepreneurial path, and particularly around leading up to founding Neon?
Absolutely. I think the first one was culture.
Yeah.
And coming from Seattle to the Silicon Valley, I already had a predisposition to tune in to that Silicon Valley culture of entrepreneurship. I was inspired by Paul Graham, his essays, and How to Start a Company is probably the most influential thing that I've written, which then I thought, okay, I'm going to do a 1-2 punch. Step one, I'm just going to move to the Silicon Valley. Facebook wanted me to work for them, and I was like, well, that's going to be my vehicle. But the second punch is like, well, the people that are here in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, are wired differently compared to the people I have in Seattle. At the time, I was getting antsy. I went to business school just to also see, and I got admitted to the University of Washington. At the time, my English was not that great, and so I did okay on all these essays and stuff. But I had a perfect score on math. But then I walked in, and everybody was sharing their stories, and I was like, God, everybody's just lost. I don't want to be here. So I quit the business school, which was the University of Washington Business School, on the first day. Wow. And I didn't do it. And instead, I remember that day very well. I walked back home and I signed the Facebook offer and moved to the Bay Area in the next few weeks.
Wow, incredibly cool. And then fast forward to 2024, where you are now with Neon. There's a growing importance of AI and machine learning. So how does Neon serverless Postgres architecture help enhance these technologies? And are there any future developments that you anticipate in this intersection?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Every company will be an AI company, or not. And I think we had a very similar dynamic this with cloud. I just think AI is going to be bigger than cloud.
Yeah.
And cloud is $1 trillion. So like IT spend, or at least they're heading that direction. They will be $1 trillion IT spend. By the way, AI is accelerating the cloud spend. And just like AI is accelerating the cloud spend, it will accelerate any consumption-based software, should that software be relevant in the next generation AI world. Our first step into AI was the support of vectors, and we support one of the fastest vector search implementations. And the reason people care about vector searches in the AI world is because they're building those things that's called RAGs. RAGs stand for retrieval augmented generation. And you need your AI model that kind of think about it as the brain. But then you need to take knowledge, which is fresh knowledge that model might not be aware of. And when you interact with the model for whichever reason, you need to bring context of that data that you know and that the brain doesn't know. And in order to bring that knowledge and make the AI system aware of that knowledge, you need a vector store or a vector database. Today, maybe in the future, those models will be able to just ingest that knowledge separately. And, this may change over time. But as of right now, you need a vector database, and the RAGs architecture are pretty well defined. They were kind of solidified during the year 23. So we do that. We do that very well with our support of the Postgres extension PG Vector. We're contributors to PG Vector, and we are collaborating with the creator of PG Vector, Andrew Kane. So that's our first step. The next step, I think, is very interesting, and we're working on that. So we have some experiments in the lab. Think about all the people that are interacting with the database when they're either building an application or running the application in production. There are a bunch of them. Yeah. And let's look at their titles. One title is software developer, right? Every business, every application is built by software developers. So there's a bunch of software developers. And almost every application needs a database. So here they are doing stuff. There's also an SRE, typically, or a DevOps person, provisioning databases, setting up the infrastructure, establishing, putting control, security, stuff like that. There's typically a security engineer and making sure that your precious data is not going to be extracted, hacked, leaked, yada, yada, changed, dropped, destroyed, stuff like that. And then there's a DBA. And smaller companies don't have DBAs, and bigger companies do, because they want to make sure that the database performs today and will perform tomorrow. And they perform various maintenance tasks. They're watching that the indexes are well designed, that there's enough capacity, that the costs are in check, all of those things. So now think about AI is of giving a massive lever to every single person that is surrounding your technology. And think about, for every job title, there will be job title as a service or an AI version of that job title. And they won't do everything, but they will give, this massive, 10x lever to each one of those people. When I think about a DBA as a service, for example, I think about, in the job of creating indexes, we can create those indexes automatically, and AI can suggest those indexes for you. Neon happens to have preview environments, so you can go and create a branch of your production environment, change indexes, and then demonstrate it very viscerally to the actual DBA, to a human DBA, that, hey, you should add those indexes, man. And by the way, I already did it. And I did it in a sandbox environment, which is a full copy of your production environment. And this workloads that I know you are running, because I'm running this database in production, is going to get faster. And I've proven it to you. So would you like to push this button and move all that into production? Yes, no. And so see how much easier that is compared to, my database is underperforming. I need to go and run an investigation. There's a bunch of tools. They're all like open source, but there's a whole bunch of them. You need to know that. You need to run those tools to diagnose what's going on. Maybe right now, the issue that we're observing an hour ago, but now the issue is not pronounced, so we need to go back in time. So it's tricky. And that's why DBAs in large organizations are paid a lot of money. Oracle DBAs paid tremendous amount of money. And, they're very good professionals, and they know what they're doing. But we're entering the world of software as a service, where these are supposed to just work. So that is one example of what's possible. And I'll stop it at the DBA. But like I said, for every job title, there is an AI version of that job title.ai that gives a 10x lever for everybody with that job title.
And I think if we scroll down our news feeds, I think we're very often guilty of focusing too heavily maybe on just Fortune 500 companies and the impacts that it can have on those. And I'd love to shine a light on the advantages for early stage companies. So with that in mind, in what ways can early stage companies leverage open source databases like Neon serverless Postgres to scale more effectively? And what are the potential challenges that they should be aware of too when doing that?
Well, I think you also hit the nail on the head with this question. Our audience is actually SMBs, small and medium businesses, and lower part of the mid-market. And over time, our strategy to push it up and up. And the advantage of that is we have a much higher iteration rate with our customers. Last week, on the best day, we had 3,000 databases created on the platform in one day, which means 3,000 people have the intention of building an application on top of the Neon database. Now, some of them play around and walk away, but we have that volume, right? We have that volume and people are trying things. And at any point in time, at every second, we have multiple workloads that have a good amount of diversity from their, what kind of workload that is, and databases are general purpose systems running on the Neon platform. The other advantage of smaller companies is they cannot afford extra headcount. And they cannot afford extra headcount because the ratio of what their scale is to the headcount doesn't make sense if you keep bringing more people. Right? In a very large organization, right, we have 10,000 developers. Okay, for 10,000 developers, I'm going to be able to afford, 20 DBAs. Or for a very large, super profitable business, call it for Fortune 500, I will use a banking example. Let's say this is my private wealth management. I'm churning through trillions of dollars in that system. Of course, I can afford whoever I want on the staff. But for a small and medium business, for a mid-market, every headcount is precious. And if you can use technology and not have that headcount instead, I'm always choosing technology. And that means that this part of the market is a lot more receptive to consume technology right now. If they can, see advantage that this technology brings them vis-a-vis competition and whatnot. So that is where you should start, actually. If you build a developer tool and you want that developer tool to be successful, at scale, you will have roughly 50-50 of what you're making in the mid-market versus the enterprise, and you will have much fewer customers in the enterprise than in the mid-market. But if you start an SMB in the mid-market, you will build a better product because you will build the product for the masses, and you will use your product management will build features in the order of, how many people benefit from those features. And you have the full kind of consumption with 3,000 people joining a day. That's a lot of people. So you have a lot of statistical significance of how you prioritize your features. When you build for the enterprise from day zero, well, yeah, sure, security, compliance, all those things, those are all useful things, but there will be very custom things you will be forced to do for large enterprise customers because there are $1 million deals on the line. And that prevents you from building a big product because the order at which you're building features now are skewed towards this one very large customer.
And Neon's architecture also offers unique features such as serverless multi-cloud capabilities and database branching. And for business leaders, I'd love to try and bring this to life a little bit by elaborating on how these features can actually provide that competitive edge and the challenge that they may overcome in their development too, because that is what brings it all to life, isn't it, for a lot of people?
Correct. I would separate them in two buckets. One bucket is price performance. So price performance in a product like ours is always the goal. And without it, if 10x worse on price performance, you should just go home. Now, our original goal was to match AWS Aurora performance. which is probably the closest product to Neon that is already successful and widespread, is AWS Aurora. They also separated storage and compute in a different way than us, but nonetheless, they did separate storage and compute. And we're matching Aurora performance. We match Aurora performance while being multi-cloud, while being serverless, while scaling to zero, which AWS Aurora doesn't. And so there's kind of more to the price performance story. There is a team, by the way, the head of that team is in the UK, that's working on storage scalability. And there are results in the lab that are just mind-blowing for me and will be more than competitive on price performance once those land in the next couple of months. So price performance will never stop. The other bit is just the total cost of ownership. And it's a combination of developer productivity and delight. Developers love to work with something that is easier to use, easier to consume. They feel that it's built for them rather than, it's an infrastructure that is, reliable but hard to use. And I think that's where AWS products are generally arriving into. That is, it's infrastructure that is reliable but hard to use. And the bar for ease of use changed. And the companies that are setting the bar for the ease of use now are companies like GitHub, companies like Vercel, companies like, Temporal, or something like companies like Sentry. And all of those companies are basically doing something that you would have to deal with infrastructure. And again, clouds are the new on-prem kind of thing, and turning them into developer products. So like I said, the second bucket is the bucket of developer experience, ease of use, and which contributes to the total cost of ownership and the overall delight of how to use the product. And there's a big audience that loves Neon, big audience of developers that all love Neon, which I think is a massive strength for us. These are the two things.
It really is. And I'm curious, how do you see serverless databases, particularly Neon, transforming the traditional database landscape for both developers and enterprises? And for anyone listening, are there any potential limitations or downsides of this transformation that they need to be aware of?
So things go slowly, then suddenly. Yeah. And I think the transformation is called developer first and AI. And when you fast forward a few years, it will be unthinkable for you to consume databases as kind of raw database as a service rather than presented to you as a developer platform, which is AI enabled. I think that's just the gist of it. Think about the world where GitHub didn't exist. So we'll be consuming Git as a service, and while that's useful, the reality is so much better than Git as a service. And the driver for that, like I said, is developer experience. And the driver for that is AI. I want to mention one more thing.
Sure.
So if you think about what is the key architectural enabler for things like this, you mentioned branching, which is what Neon supports. And I'm going to expand it a little bit. So at the end of the day, Neon or any other database is a stateful system, right? It's there to store state. And if you look at another stateful system, call it Git, it also stores state. It's the state of your code. Or you take another stateful system such as Apache Kafka, it's there to store the state of the message queue. If you look at Git or you look at Kafka, those things have a time dimension. And that time dimension is all the commits you make into your source code, or the time dimension of Kafka is the offset. What is the offset from which you consuming your message queue? And you can always go to Kafka and reconsume those messages from this specific offset. And then maybe you can throw it away and then reconsume it again from the same offset. And that's why, because Kafka stores the history, stores the offsets. And Git stores the history, stores the commits. Postgres actually stores that as well. It does not expose it very well. And I think I'm a believer that any stateful system should be exposing that history for developers and allow people to reset to some point in time, to allow people to see what the state of the data is at that point in time. It allows people to branch off of that point in time. And that creates a lot of interesting opportunities and delights for the developer experience. Not only is it a better audit trail, right? You're not going to lose data. You can always go, back 10 minutes, even if something happens. But you can start recording the state at which something interesting happened by simply storing some sort of token that is corresponding to that point in time. In the Postgres land, this thing is already there. It's not widely used. And what Neon allows you to do, it allows you to connect to the database, not necessarily at the latest state, but at the state that is given to you by the log sequence number. So you can always go back. And once you have a time dimension, it opens, and the intuition about the time dimension is today it's less expensive to support the full history than in the past because storage is dirt cheap, right? So now you can support, a fairly large, and also it's scalable. So you're not going to be bottlenecked on the fact that you're supporting the time dimension anymore. And so once you have that, it opens up a whole slew of capabilities around how you build software. So now you can branch things. Now you can reset your state. Now you can run tests that all start with a particular point in time, advance the database, validate if the test is working or not working, and the next test will just reset to a previous point in time and run that from scratch. Your sentry errors that you're detecting can record the state of the database that was right there when the error has occurred. Your security checkers can also remember the state of the database at the time that we had, a detection of a vulnerability or an attack or DDoS. So all of that is kind of at developers' fingertips. And you don't need to worry about backups. You don't need to worry about the fact that you're running out of storage. All of that is integrated into a great cloud experience. And with a time dimension, your universe expands. You add a dimension to what you can do as a developer.
And also, I think we should highlight that Neon's been on an incredible journey since its inception, just in 2021. But of course, here we are at the beginning of 2024. What are your long-term visions for the company? How do you plan to sustain this innovation and market relevance in not only this year, but the years ahead too?
I think the mission is very simple. The mission is to fold Postgres in the cloud.
Yeah.
How we get there is through developer experience and price performance and AI, and the order can change over time. But where we're heading is we're building the most friendly, the most easy to use, and the default Postgres platform in the cloud. The tailwinds of Postgres are incredible. And if you go to DB Engine ranking, or you go to Stack Overflow and see that what kind of database developers choose these days is Postgres. Yeah. That's pretty clear. Now, there are many Postgres providers. I think a lot of them are looking at this as like, okay, I'm just going to provide Postgres as a service, which is hard enough, by the way, because it's a stateful system and you need to run upgrades and backups and yada, 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 build a control plane, all of those things. Our vision is much bigger than that. Our vision is this: all those things are just table stakes. And if you put developer in the center and imagine that for developer, working with data is just as easy as working with code on GitHub, and that developer is 10x leveraged by AI at every point of the journey, that's what vision for Neon is. And in that vision, we're staying absolutely true to Postgres and want to become the default Postgres in the cloud.
And before you came on the podcast, I was doing a little research on you, and I learned that you'd secured a substantial $40 million investment, and that elevates your total funding to, I think, $100 million. So how do you envision this capital propelling the company's growth and helping it stand out in this highly competitive serverless database market? Is there anything you can share around that?
Absolutely. So the majority of the dollars are going into product development. So I'm under an opinion that the best product wins. And we have an incredibly high bar. We have a ton of applications coming to Neon every day. And we're hiring fantastic engineers to build the best product. In addition to that, we turned on our billing in April. And since our revenues have ARR, right? Annual recurring revenue has been growing between 20 to 35% month on month. So it's a very rapid on ramp with, and there's, a few holes in it, obviously, in the product just now. Some enterprise features are not there and whatnot, but the ramp has been very steady and just surprising and exciting to see that ramp. And we see that, we're making the product better, we benefit from that. Making a product better, we benefit from that. So that's the majority of dollars go there. And on the go-to-market side, we're discovering various cadences that will later scale with additional dollars. So in every new company, and every new company, think about like a popular song, right? You may know music, but it does not guarantee that you will write a popular song. You can play a song, and you can write a song, but you don't know if it's going to take off and people would love the song. And maybe unless you're Rihanna, then you just know. But what I'm trying to say is it's the experimentation that gets you there. And you can't build a company if you are not taking calculated risks and if you're not experimenting. And then once certain experiments work, and in the code, in the lab, the feedback that you're getting is your test results, your prototypes, you're playing with stuff, you're looking at them. And in the real world, you put some signal into the world, speaks back to you. That's when having a high velocity of consumption and new people coming in is super important so you can iterate faster. So a whole bunch. So some of the money that we've raised, and we have most of this in the bank, is spent on real world experimentation and various hypotheses that we're placing in front of us. And it's like, well, we know that what people love in the SMB and mid-market, let's make a hypothesis of what people would like in the enterprise, or let's make a hypothesis of what people would like in this adjacent area. Let's go and figure out what would be an action that will create some feedback from the world, and let's run it. Now, obviously, those things cost money if you want to do them well. And so some of the money goes on experimentation. Some of the money goes on the core development. There's a long roadmap for everything that we can do. And then some of the money goes into, back office running the company and the go-to-market efforts to generate more revenue.
Incredibly cool. I love chatting with you today. But before I let you go, you have had a hugely successful career. There's an old saying that when you make it to the top of that elevator ride, you should always remember to send it back down to the next person waiting. So for anyone listening that maybe they're an aspiring tech entrepreneur, is there any advice that you would offer, especially to that person who might be interested in tackling complex technology challenges like database managers, do that again, especially those interested in tackling complex technological challenges like database management? Any advice that you would offer to anyone listening?
There is an entrepreneurial path that I'm a huge fan of, and I love mentoring people who are getting on that path. I think the raw ingredients into that is to be super smart and high energy, and then you also need courage that can be learned. Then there's a million questions that people have as they go through the entrepreneurial journey, and they're custom, and you can answer those questions from first principles. And that's when having mentors is helpful, because you can validate your first principle thinking with them. When feedback loops are quick, like in just building the product, it's one thing, but in the real world, the feedback loops are a little longer. I'm proud of the fact that lots of people from single store started companies, and some of those companies are very successful. So we have a great reputation here as single store alumni, especially early days, as entrepreneurs, as technologists, as people who are, just being super smart. So I think if there is an interest in the entrepreneurial career, you want to put yourself into a place where you're surrounded with like-minded people. So that experience of me quitting the business school and going down to California with starry eyes, knowing that this is where the entrepreneurial culture is. And it's both the geographical location and a specific location of a company. And at the time in 2010, Facebook was such a powerhouse and there was a lot of energy and excitement there. So I would try to put yourself in the situation where you can learn those things through osmosis again, and be brave in taking the plunge into entrepreneurship. You can learn it at an early stage startup, because at an early stage startup, everybody knows everything. And you can learn it, of course, by starting your own company. And you can learn it, of course, by reading programs, essays, by reading 0 to 1, read from Peter Thiel, by reading The Hard Things About Hard Things from Horowitz. Lots of literature, very good, kind of true to the Silicon Valley literature has been written about the startup scene. But I think nothing beats being here in a specific geographical location, and in addition to that, in a specific company that is early stage and they're solving problems that are unique to that early stage. Because when you come in at a later stage, all that sausage making thing has been already done for you by somebody else, and you're standing on the shoulders of their work.
Fantastic advice. I'm going to say now, before I let you go, if there's anything we can do for you, because some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or might listen to this podcast. So if there is a person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, because he or she might just hear this, who would it be and why? And let's see if we can manifest something together today.
I was talking this earlier to a friend of mine whose name's Ankur Goyal, who I'm a huge fan of. He's running a company. He's a single store alum. He ran engineering, and he's now building a company, Braintrust Data. We were talking about David Singleton, the VP of engineering at Stripe. I'd love to have a breakfast with him. Maybe Ankur will make it happen, or I'll put a shout out here. I'd love to have a conversation with him.
Well, sir, we'll both send that out into the universe. Let's see what will happen there. And for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about you, your work, how they can contact your team, etc., or just more information about everything that you're doing, where would you like to point everyone listening?
Well, you can just go on neon.tech. You can tune in to Neon Database Twitter feed. My personal email is nikita@neon.tech. So pretty easy. And then my handle on Twitter is NikitaBase, which is like a little play with the database technology where I spend so much time working on. So that's how easy it is to reach back out to me.
Well, love chatting with you today, learning more about how you're revolutionizing Postgres databases with serverless capabilities. An incredible journey that you're on, and I'd love to stay in touch, see how that story continues to evolve. But it is that story behind it all that really brought it to life for me. And just a big thank you for sharing that with me today.
Of course. Very happy to be here. Thank you, Neil.
It's clear to me that Neon isn't just a company. It's almost a harbinger of change in the world of cloud databases, especially with that serverless multi-cloud capability. And Neon is not only pushing the boundaries of Postgres databases, but also shaping the future of cloud computing and AI. But I'm sure we have people listening all over the world that are much more specialist and smarter than me in this area. So if you've got anything you'd like to share, please email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can also get me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @NeilC.Hughes. Let's keep this conversation going. Other than that, I'll be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll have a completely different topic, but just a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.